I'm Leslie Noble, and I'm a therapist, writer, and truth teller who helps people stop performing and start becoming who they are. And this is No Bullshit Truth Radio. This podcast is for educational and insight only. It is not therapy, not a substitute for mental health treatment, and not a place to receive mental health care. It is not psychological or legal advice. Nothing shared here creates a therapeutic relationship, and nothing should be used to diagnose, treat, or replace the support of a licensed professional who knows your full story. If you're interested in getting therapy, put in Psychology Today, look that up, put in your zip code and what you're looking for, and it should give you a list of therapists in your area. So I'm glad to be here today, and happy Memorial Day for those of you that had plans this weekend and enjoying your 3-day weekend. I want you to know this is my 6th time to record this. You have some days where you're on and some days where you're off, and today I just cannot get my act together. I don't know why, but I'm going to jump into this, and hopefully what I'm talking about will make sense today. So people aren't confused about who they are. I'm going to talk about self-identity today. People aren't confused about who they are. They're exhausted from being who the world told them to be. And I would say it is a crisis in our country and in our world and in our family and in our relationships right now. I want you to sit with it for a second. Self-identity and who you believe yourself to be instead of who the world told you to be is so important to healing and so important to navigating the world and our culture. Identity fatigue is real, and I'm going to be honest with you, it's everywhere. It's in our families, it's in our workplaces, it's in our relationships, and it's in entire cultures. It is also so dominant in social media, and it's become such an influence not only on us, but our kids and our families and our community, that if you don't identify this way, you are a big loser. If you aren't believing what I believe, then you are a big loser. And I want us to sit and really think about that for just a minute, about how your own self-identity has been formed. So one of the things that I love to do is watch kids play. And if you watch kids play on the playground, you notice how free and just unencumbered they are. They use their imaginations. They can use sand to build an entire city. I remember when I was little, me and my friends in the neighborhood, we'd ride our bikes, but there was a creek that wasn't very far, and we would go down there and pretend like we were Little House on the Prairie was really popular. So we would pretend that we were like part of Little House on the Prairie, and we were out there building our house and all kinds of things. I think we built a fort out of sticks or whatever. I miss that about kids, and I think so much of their identity is forming around social media. It's forming around our culture and who we tell them to be. It's formed around, can you pass this test? Can you get this marker? And I think through play and self-identity play, so much creativity is born from that. So recently, just to transition off of that for just a second, because I want you to think about all that I just said, I fell down a nerd rabbit hole, and I am not ashamed to tell you that I'm a nerd. I'm a complete nerd. I love to read. I love to read about history. I love to read about really just about anything. Politics. I love to read history. I also love fiction and nonfiction. I usually have 2 books going at the same time. And when I write my blog, I have a blog, I try to make sure it's really well researched before I publish it. So I'm always researching. For those of you that know me, know that I'm started martial arts. It's been almost 2 years and have been training with some just really awesome people. And one of the instructors the other night was talking about the history of karate and the history of China and Japan. And so I did a little bit more digging, did a little bit more based off his conversation. And I'm not going to fill you with martial arts stuff today. However, I have been really surprised at the comparison to martial arts or just the Asian culture and the healing that we're doing today. We steal things that we don't even realize we're stealing from that culture, yoga being one of them. The other is acupuncture, and if you're familiar with energy healing or Reiki, that's another one that we've assimilated into our own culture. Martial arts being another one of those that we have assimilated into our own culture, and we've made it ours, and some of it is based on our own American culture. So don't judge me for talking about China for just a minute, but I have a point, so just hang in there with me. So I was reading about Okinawa, China, and how identity gets shaped under pressure. And the deeper I went, the more I realized it's really not about history. This is about right now and what is happening in our world right now. And this is about you and your family. So most people think identity is something you find. No, identity is not something you find. It's something that gets shaped, it gets pressured, and it gets suppressed. And sometimes it gets stolen. And we all do it. We all do it. And I think it's part of that journey is figuring out who you are, what your preferences are. Who are you at a soul level and an identity level, at the authentic part of you, and who is that? Clinically, identity confusion comes from environments where your emotions weren't allowed. Your truth wasn't safe and your needs were inconvenient. Your authenticity was punished. Your survival depended on compliance. So I'm going to say that again because that was a mouthful. Identity confusion, when you get confused about who you are, it comes from environments where how you felt was not allowed. Speaking your truth wasn't always safe. Your needs were too much. Your authenticity was punished, and your survival depended on compliance. And sometimes authenticity really pisses people off. It triggers them. And I have found that in my own life where I'm just straightforward about who I am and what I want and being honest, because it reflects back or it gives people this mirror of places where they're not living authentically in their own lives. So once you start to follow that path, be ready sometimes to piss people off. Be ready to trigger them sometimes. Be ready for people not to always like you. Because people that are authentic don't always sugarcoat it, and they speak their truth. So identity, who you are, it doesn't disappear. It gets renamed, and eventually people get exhausted. They get exhausted, and I see that all the time in my office. People come into my office and say, I don't know what my purpose is. I'm exhausted. I'm tired of being who I am in this relationship. I'm tired of being who I am at work, and I do not feel fulfilled in my life. And it's not because you don't know who you are. It's because you've been performing. You're performing a version of yourself that was never you to begin with. And in our culture, we've gotten so performance-based that we confuse for performance for real confidence and real authenticity. And it's so easy to do that. And so here's where history comes in. So for centuries, as I was looking back in history in Asian culture, Okinawa existed between two powerful forces in the Asian culture, which was China and Japan. Okinawa used to have a long tributary relationship with China, not domination, but just cultural exchange. Chinese scholars, diplomats, and martial artists traveled to Okinawa bringing philosophy, medicine, and fighting systems. Okinawans integrated what resonated and left what didn't. That's identity informed through choice. But then something happened. There was an invasion in 1609 that happened with Japan. This was not cultural exchange, it was identity restriction. So what happened during that invasion is that weapons were banned. Yeah, weapons were banned. Their language was suppressed, their customs were monitored, and their autonomy was taken. Sound familiar? Sound familiar with what's happening right now, just kind of slowly over time? Autonomy is what's trying to be suppressed slowly over time. And so what happened to the Okinawans is they were forced to hide parts of themselves to survive. But here's the real truth. You can't take away someone's soul. You can't take away their identity. You don't just control them, you reshape them. And that's what's happened. That's what's happened in our systems and in our families and in our relationship. Identity suppression, just like in Japan, was not an accident. It was a strategy. And what happened as a result of them trying to suppress their identity, banning weapons, banning their autonomy, is they were forced to come up with their own system to protect themselves. And that is how the samurai was formed. That was how karate was formed, is they would use their bodies as a weapon. But one of the things that Asian culture knew when all of these changes were happening and all of this oppression is you couldn't just hand somebody a sword or teach them how to use their body and not talk about the person they were becoming in the process. And I think that's where sometimes we lose identity or the ability to identify and the ability to shape our own identity. One of the things that was really important in that culture was your character, your humbleness, who you were as a person. One of the things the instructor always says is don't go looking for a fight. And that was so much from the Asian culture in itself, is don't go looking for a fight, but if you have to get in one, finish it. That's why karate is called empty hands. I'm going to come with you with no intent of violence. I'm going to come to you just as who I am with empty hands, and I'll use them if I have to, but that wasn't the point. And so their identity was so much formed on character and who they were. So when people aren't allowed to be themselves, they learn to form identity quietly. And that's what I see clinically every week. People who became hyper independent because no one showed up for them. People who become invisible because it was dangerous to be seen. People who became easy because their needs were too much. And that's where the people pleasing, or when people come in and they say, I'm an empath. And it's not that I don't believe that people can be empaths. And I'm basing this off of all of my own journey, is that empathy sometimes can be toxic to ourselves because we leave ourselves on the curb trying to be empathetic to the other person and giving them too much of a benefit of the doubt. And that's where sometimes we can suppress our own needs. So people also will become strong because being soft and being vulnerable was not safe growing up. And these are things that form your identity when you're, not only when you're a kid, but experiences through relationships and school and just being out in the world. But identity formed in the dark is still identity. It's just unspoken. It's unvalidated identity, but it's there and it's waiting. And as I said in the beginning, that's exactly what happened in Okinawa. People practiced their traditions, they practiced their arts, their selfhood in secret, not because they were weak, but because they were strategic. And then I think eventually every person reaches a moment where the world tries to rename them, where you start to think, I'm too much, so I shouldn't ask for that. I'm too emotional. I might be too intense if I come across like this, or I'm too sensitive, or I'm too ambitious. Or the opposite. You're so strong. You're so calm. You're so easygoing. You're so selfless. And you start performing the version of yourself that gets the least resistance. Let me say that again. You start performing the version of yourself that gets the least resistance. And that's not identity. That's not authenticity. That's adaptation. And adaptation is not authenticity. Adaptation is not authenticity. And that is the part that matters. You've learned to adapt. You haven't learned to step in to your own power, confidence in who you are, and be unapologetic. So this is the part that matters, is that Okinawa's relationship with China was chosen. It was a cultural exchange. It was influence and not domination. Identity formed through your own choice is healthy. Identity formed through pressure is survival. When Japan later forced assimilation, it wasn't influence, it was erasure. And that's what we try to do sometimes, is we erase an identity that we feel uncomfortable with. We erase what role we think women should play in society. We erase bad things that are happening, or the truth about the bad things that are happening, because it makes us uncomfortable. We erase that identity. We erase other cultures and their influence because it makes us uncomfortable. We erase gender identity. We erase relationship identity and what we believe marriage to be, not what we believe it is for us, but what culture tells us it needs to be. And to be honest with you, it doesn't work. It causes oppression. It causes conflict. It causes lack of freedom. The things that we say that we are fighting for, the truth is we're fighting against them. We say that we want freedom, but we are oppressing other people, other cultures. We say that we want to be able to be ourselves, but we adapt in our own environments to make people feel more comfortable. And that's the clinical parallel in all of this. Some parts of your identity have been chosen and some parts are just inherited. Some parts were forced by our culture and some parts were survival strategies you never got to outgrow. And the problem I have with all of this is not a shame thing. This is a moment to think and reflect. The problem with all of this is we never stop and think. We move so quickly, we move so fast. Oh yeah, I'm going to go believe that because I saw that. Or I'm going to go believe that theory because I've heard it. And we never stop to reflect and pause and think about, is this aligned with who I am as a person? Is this, if I believe in love and graciousness and empathy, is my beliefs or my identity, is it aligned with these things? And if it's not, that's where the work is. And it's time to outgrow what other people tell you you should do and become aligned with the person that you are becoming and who you want to be. So identity fatigue comes from carrying identities you were never supposed to carry. Identities that really aren't the part of who you are and your soul and the reason you're here. Reclaiming identity is not about just going out on this trek to find yourself. We think it is. I'm going to go out and I'm going to go find myself. There's nothing wrong with trying new things, but you're talking about preferences, figuring out what your preferences are. It's about remembering who you were before the world got a hold of you. Before the world told you this is what success means. Before the world told you this is what a good person does. Before the world told you this is what marriage is supposed to look like. Before the world told you this is who you're supposed to be. Before the world told you this is what a person that's strong looks like. Before the world told you this is what it means to be who you are. We got to stop the madness because we're so judgmental and shame-based of other people when they don't fit in the box of what we think of who people are. And I know for myself, it's taken years to unwind all that, and really figure out what is it that I value, who do I believe in, or what do I believe in, and finding things that make me feel fulfilled. And some of those are not necessarily what other people enjoy. Embracing the fact that I'm a little bit of a nerd, loving that spiritual side of me, loving animals and hiking and the things that I love. And it's not about going out there and trying different things, but it's also loving the parts of ourselves that we aren't necessarily proud of. The people pleasing, the over-giving, the over-responsibility. It's learning to be gentle with that part that you over-identify with. That's the identity work. So how do we do all this? Well, it's reconnecting to your own internal cues. So listening to your body when something doesn't feel right. And I can tell you, every single time I've worked with somebody that got betrayed in a relationship, their body spoke to them before anything else. They just weren't listening to it. It's the same thing I hear over and over. I gained weight when I was in that relationship. I gained so much weight. I felt heavy. I didn't feel safe, or I didn't feel anchored in that relationship. I felt sick. I got sick all the time in that relationship. I broke out in hives, or I had anxiety, or I started drinking a lot more in that relationship than I would have normally. We totally erase internal cues, and that is how we become connected to ourselves. And rebuilding emotional permission. Here's the thing I've learned. I'm going to share some wisdom with you for just a minute. Not everybody's going to agree with the decision and the choices you're going to make. And we worry so much about what other people think. Whatever decision you make, somebody's going to disagree with it and somebody's going to support you in it. There's always going to be the naysayers. That's just part of it. That's just part of it. That is part of life, and we have to accept it. Not everyone is going to agree with what you do. They're not. And you just have to make the decision that is best for you. Another one is learning to tolerate visibility. And I don't mean everybody has to get on social media and be visible. What I mean by that is learning to stand in your truth and not everybody agreeing with it. Learning to realize that you belong at the table just like everybody else, and that no one is any different than you are. I've learned that throughout my lifetime. I used to think, oh, I want to be that person. But here's the part I want you to hear is that when you see the good in another person, you are recognizing your own goodness. When you see the power in the authenticity in another person, you are recognizing those traits in yourself. And people are mirrors to who we want to be, and they're mirrors of what we need to heal. Another way to work on identity is practicing boundaries, and boundaries are not what people think they are. Boundaries don't keep people away. Boundaries are so I can be in relationship with you. Boundaries are so that I can stay safe in this space with you. Boundaries don't have to be this rigid gate or fence that we put up. Boundaries are, this is what I can do and this is what I can't do. And sometimes we think when we get in relationships with people that anything goes because we're married or because we have a commitment, and that is just not true. It's okay to practice boundaries in relationships. And in fact, I would even, as somebody who works with couples, your chances of longevity are going to be better if you work on your own inner self-identity in relation to that person, and that you practice boundaries when you need them. And then the other thing is choosing truth over performance. Oh my gosh, in our world, we love the performance. We are addicted to outrage. And I tell people all the time, you cannot live in a state of fight or flight all of the time. Turn off the news. Turn off social media and the next outrage or the thing for us to be angry about. You have to stop and ask yourself, what is truth and what is performance? And performance is a billion-dollar industry. Think about it. Performing, saying the most outrageous thing gets the most clicks. It gets the most watch. People will watch outrageous things. We love the reality show. We love it. We love the reality show. But it is not allowing your nervous system to experience safety. And it's not teaching you the difference between what's real and what's fantasy. And also, it's not teaching us or even our kids, the future generation, to think, because we're seeing images so quickly and we're in that state of nervous system regulation. If any skill you need to learn in your life is how to emotionally regulate and how to build your own inner safety. So identity is really not about discovery. It's a return to who you've always been. A return to the self that you've always had to hide. A return to the truth you had to mute in your life. A return to the person you were before survival required performance. So here's my question for today. Not who are you, but who were you before the world tried to rename you? Who were you? And can you soften into that? Sometimes we're afraid to show that part of ourselves because we're afraid we're going to be taken advantage of. We cannot control the woundedness of other people. But what we can do is step in and offer the world who we are and not hide those parts. The world is so desperate right now for kindness and love and empathy and truth. So if that's who you are, don't hide that part of yourself, because that version of you is not gone. It's not lost. They're not broken, that you're not confused. It's just waiting for you to stop performing and start becoming who you are. Thank you for joining me today. This is No Bullshit Truth Radio, where we talked about identity today. I hope this was helpful to you. If this is helpful to you, I'd love for you to check out my website. I'm the founder of the Strong Heart Warrior Project, where I teach people how to heal from betrayal and become their best version of themselves. I've written a book I'm really proud of called the No More Betrayal Guide that teaches you. There's a whole section on self-identity. It's evidence-based and well-researched, and it's what I wish somebody had given me when I was learning how to heal from betrayal. Also, I have a community where it's safe and only people are allowed that are safe and are supportive in that community. I'd love for you to join that. So see you next time.